to In the Field, a series of short interviews with musicians, artists, performers living in the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond. Today I'm meeting with Polly Moller, composer, flautist, vocalist, multi-instrumentalist.
Thanks for coming by, Rent.
And thanks for having us in your home. We're going to be talking to Polly about her upcoming performance at the Outsound New Music Summit, July 23rd at the San Francisco Community Music Center, and also finding more out about her music and some of her escapades in the sonic world. So tell me, Polly, what is it that you may remember from your early childhood or your past that had a major influence or impact of in your musical life?
I remember the summer in between 3rd grade and 4th grade. That would have made me 8 years old.
Okay.
My mom brought home from the library an LP recording of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, Symphony No. 3, and I remember lying down in front of the record player, reading the liner notes and listening to the symphony and deciding that I wanted to play the violin.
Wow, so you have a very vivid recollection, memory of that instance.
I do. I can remember holding the record sleeve,
right,
and reading what was on the back of it and deciding I want to do this and I want to play what I'm hearing right now, which is a violin section. And so 4th grade was the time in my particular public school system where music instruction started. But when I got to school, I found out there wasn't a strings program.
Oh, okay.
So I couldn't play the violin at school, so I kind of decided on the wind instrument that had a similar range. So that's how I ended up on the flute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm a flute player because the violin wasn't available.
You know, that's not the first time I've heard that in
really?
my musical travels. Yeah. Sometimes when we grew up, we go into music school programs and we kind of get the instrument that's dealt to us, so to speak, right? So, but in this case, it sounds like the flute grew on you.
It did.
And became an instrument that you have developed with over time.
It did. It took me. I didn't have a private teacher. I was learning in school band, so I didn't have any specific advice about how to get the flute to make a sound.
Right.
So my best guess is that it took me 3 weeks to produce a sound on the flute, and I remember being terribly frustrated and terribly down on myself, and that it was a huge victory when that note finally came out. So when I went on later in life to be a flute teacher, I really focused on that first moment. I thought of all the best practices for getting that first note out, and I prided myself on being able to get a beginner to make a sound in 5 minutes.
Wow.
Because I figured that would get them on the path.
Right.
If they immediately had that positive
based off of your own experience, that knowing the frustration. I see. So if you were able to get someone to play a note after the first 5 minutes, there's a good chance they'll continue to play music.
Yeah. That they might like the flute if they liked how they sounded.
So you spent time early on working with your instrument.
Yes.
And you talk about getting that first note and feeling the elation. Was that around the same time that you felt, oh, this is what I want to do? Or was there later times or a moment where you figured out that this is music is really what I want to do?
That did come later.
Yeah.
It took, I guess that would be 5 years, because the specific epiphany I had was at age 13 when I felt, what amounted to a divine calling, that music was what I was meant to do just as a life path. So I remember the experience vividly, and it happened in church, actually.
Really?
That I felt that was my purpose, and that I was going to devote myself to the flute. Right. And it wasn't until I had been in college for a while as a music major that I realized that classical music was not the way I wanted to go.
I see.
So between age 13 and I guess it was age 20 or 21, I worked very hard on becoming, you know, a badass classical player.
Okay.
And it wasn't until the early 20s that I realized I didn't actually like classical music. And so that gave me a bit of an identity crisis, and I thought, oh dear, I've worked so hard on this.
Yeah.
What do I do now? And so that was when I discovered that there were extended techniques out there, and that there was improvisation out there, and there was composition out there, and I had thought all those things were off limits to me.
Really?
As a classical player, you know, a classical player plays stuff other people wrote in a common practice way, and, you know, you don't deviate from interpreting other people's work. So I had to realize at that point that no, there's a lot of other stuff you can do creatively as a performer.
That's interesting you say that. I remember when I was speaking with Tom McDonough, he was talking about classical music in a sense that he realized that at a point these particular individuals that he had, you know, because he came from that background too, rigid practice of classical music, that these individuals who wrote this music, though, they were breaking the rules anyway to start with, to create these things. And interesting you talk about the concept of being kind of broken and held in, so to speak, and trying to break out. That's what I mean, break out of that.
Yeah, and that is a newer concept, right? Because in the classical tradition, people used to improvise regularly. It was part of their training and what it was expected of them.
Yes.
But somehow that became, you know, something you weren't supposed to do.
Right. Well, marketing, pop music.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, right. So you kind of answered one of my lead-up questions, which was, you know, okay, so you're serious about music, you've grown into it, it's definitely been part of your life, and then that moment, those moments that brought you to these milestones, and then, but why are you extending the ethos, you know, and you're already, so you're saying sometime within your 20s, and realizing that the classical music wasn't the only thing you could do.
Yes. Yes.
Was there an individual or an experience that opened that door, opened your eyes to that?
Yes. I guess, you know, in my identity crisis, I needed a role model, and it all kind of crystallized the first time I heard Robert Dick play.
Oh, okay.
And he was actually the second avant-garde flute player I heard play. But there was something about his charisma and his way of creating that really resonated with me. There was Anne LaBerge first. She was the first person I heard play extended flute, and then there was Robert. So those were I guess the two role models I